Final Fantasy VI was my favorite game when I was a kid. It is really probably the best game uh, that I think of all time. Um, Final Fantasy VI has a good amount of characters that you can play as throughout the game. For its time, the game is probably above um, the standard for 1994 in terms of, I guess, uh, diversity, and there's also a game that has it's not very linear, other than the main story. There's a good amount of side quests, a pretty open world, the world of Balance, the world of Rune. So there is quite a lot of things to do for something made in 1994, where technology at the time was very limited. Nowadays, there are a lot more things you can do in video games. I'm just judging it based on how much you can actually do in the game. So let's review step by step here. Well, let's start, I guess, with the plot. Um, it doesn't have uh, the most complex plot, but it's still a very good story in the game. It's somewhat like Star Wars in some ways. It's influenced by Star Wars. It's about a group of rebels trying to free the world from Emperor Gastra's uh, empire. It also uses a lot of themes from the previous Final Fantasies, such as magic, um, the espers, which are also called phantom beasts from the Japanese version. Um, so it uses them as a plot device and as a mechanism to to play the game, because you learn magic from the from espers or phantom beasts. In previous games, they were just either called summons, phantom beasts. Um, in Final Fantasy IV, they were called phantom beasts. Um, yeah, they didn't really have a major plot uh, part in it. In six, they probably have the most important plot part. Um, Final Fantasy VI has a main character you start out with, but she doesn't end up being a main character. So there's not really one main character in Final Fantasy VI, and I think that is the interesting part of the game, is because there are lots of characters you can play as. I would say the most main ones are the first 5 or 6 you start out with: Terra, Celes, Edgar, Sabin. Um, but after a while, the game's main plot kind of fades, especially when you enter the world of Rune. After the world's destroyed at the end of, which is about halfway through the video game, it's actually a little more or less, depending on how much you want to do in the game. Because there are a lot of side quests. Me personally, I like to level up to 99 in the Dragon Forest in the second world with all the characters, and then get all the magic spells learned. I mean, it takes a lot of time. I probably wouldn't want to do that now again. But it's a really good game. Anyways, back to the plot is it's really good. It's told very well. Um, Again, it's not like the most complex plot. It also has a really good villain. Probably, in my opinion, the best Final Fantasy villain is Kefka Palazzo, which, unlike other villains, actually succeeds in destroying the world. So he's the only villain that really succeeds in his goal in in, uh, in a Final Fantasy game. Um, he's also a different kind of villain. Um, he's just a complete maniac. There's complete maniacal, crazy guy. With the only reason for that was explained was uh, just early experimentation from the Gestra Empire. Um, is what caused him to go mad. So that is that's Kefka. He's a really good villain, I think, for a video game character. He's a lot different than other ones. A lot of the villains in Final Fantasy aren't really that special. I mean, Golbez, Zemus, they were okay from Final Fantasy 4. I thought Exdeath was a very poor villain from 5, and if you go below that, there's nothing really special about the villains. They're just usually hard bosses at the end that you fight. But I think a lot of people, especially myself, took a interest in Kefka and how he's really a good villain. Okay. The story is very full and complete, um, especially for the first half. The second half of the game revolves around a lot of side quests, and basically the main plot is done by the time you enter the world of Ruin. And it's just about saving the world after that, after it's already destroyed. Um, so the first half of the game is mainly where the plot is, and then the second half is mainly side quests, and it's more. I find the world of Ruin to be more fun gameplay wise, and then the world of balance. The first, when the world's in good shape, is more of fun like plot wise. So it's kind of like divided evenly for me. It's a kind of a different experience for the first half versus the second half, because the second half is kind of like it's up to you at this point. It's not as linear at all, even though it wasn't really that linear to begin with. So, okay, music-wise, it's probably the best video game music, especially for its time. Nobuo Uematsu, if I pronounce that right, is the composer, like he was throughout most of the Final Fantasy games. This one, he does a really good job with the composing. Um, it sounds a lot more like actual music as opposed to just gaming bleeps and stuff. So it sounds really good like that. The way he did the music for 6, it's very memorable. I think most people who played Final Fantasy 6 and then played the others would either remember 7s and 6s the most, even though the other ones are pretty memorable too. It's probably his best job was 6, maybe 7 for a second. On 6, there's also the Opera House song, which is kind of funny, funny when you hear it, but I mean it's really interesting how they tried to simulate an opera voice in Final Fantasy 6. It's actually a really good song, and then there's actually a real version of that they made later uh, in Japan with an actual real opera. Um, so overall, the music is like A+. There's nothing wrong at all about the music. Gameplay wise, Final 6 does have a really good gameplay system. You learn magic from you learn magic spells from the Phantom Beasts, Espers, whatever you want to call them. It doesn't really matter. Phantom Beasts, which is called Genju in Japanese. Uh, that's just what it was called in Japanese version. I played a lot of different versions of Final Fantasy VI. Um, first there's the original release, Final Fantasy 3, um, that's what it was in America when it came out because they skipped over 2, 3, and 5. Um, and what the hell was I talking about again? Let's see. music. Yeah. So gameplay. Yeah. So it does have the Phantom Beast system where um, you learn magic from espers, from Phantom Beasts, and that is really unique, I thought, and that's really kind of what 7 is kind of based on, that system. You learn from rocks called materia in Final Fantasy 7, but in Final Fantasy 6 you learn from rocks called magicite, Magirocks, um, and the rocks teach you spells, kind of like Final Fantasy 7, except in 6 you don't lose stats um, when you learn magic spells. In Final Fantasy 7, you lose stats when you hold on to materia, um, for certain materia. Um, with sixes, you you keep all your stats. That doesn't change, but you gain certain statistics for certain magicite, like Ifrit. You get +1 strength. You know, Bismarck +2 strength. Madine +1 magic. Odin +1 speed. Tritach or Veligmander, you get +2 magic, and so you get a lot. You learn a lot from these magicite, and they don't. It's permanent too. Unlike 7, you have to actually equip the materia, and you change it up a lot. In 6s, you actually have to. I mean, it's all permanent, so it's pretty easy to win the game. And that is really, like, everything in 6 is really good. The way the fighting is very smooth. The battles are very, smooth and clean. Um, it's very it's very easy to play, and it's a good first time RPG too. It's not that hard. And actually, I think in Japan, at least when they released the game, it was kind of a counter approach uh, compared to Final Fantasy 5, which is 5 is pretty challenging. It's not that hard now, being older, but when you're younger and you're playing 5, it's kind of hard. 5 is not a very friendly game, and plus there's challenges in 5 like Omega and Omega Weapon and Shinryu, which are pretty hard to beat unless you know what you're doing. There is a trick to beating them, by the way, but I won't get into that. But in Final Fantasy 6, it's pretty easy overall, and that's really the only flaw with the gameplay. The fighting system's perfect. Everything's good. It's not that hard of a game, and that really is the only flaw with the gameplay. But it's usually people don't play Final Fantasy VI to judge how hard or easy it is. It's just because it's such a fun, awesome game. For a 16-bit 2D game, it's really amazing. It still kind of captures our hearts even like now. Like what is it, like 17, 18 years later? So um, usually we don't focus on the easiness of the difficulty, even though it is a factor. That would really be the only flaw. It could be a little harder. I mean, it's not too hard to get through much of anything. If you level up, your characters are going to be like God, because you can do 8-hit combos with the ultimate weapon and the Illumina swords, and you can kill the final boss in like one hit easily without taking any damage. It's not that difficult. Um, so it's a good first time RPG. If you're looking for something hard, it's not that hard. Yeah. So obviously 6, it's a good game overall. It's probably my favorite all-time game. I've probably played it too much by now. I'm trying to find other things to play. There's plenty of games out there. So highly recommended. Thank you.